The beauty of that though is we were able to cash flow right out of the gate. So we had about 2 months of solid cash flow where we were able to build up some of that additional operating income. That Marchish time frame, that's when things start slowing down around here. So we knew from that couple month period there was going to be a lot of opportunity here to improve these rooms, to fix them up.
Yo, what is up, everybody? I am Matt Drouin. I'm the host of the GoBigLive Real Estate Investors Podcast. I am psyched out of my mind today to have a special guest on, a friend of mine, Mr. Brett McManus, who went from corporate career to hotelier, if that's the right way to pronounce it. So I'm going to let him actually give his intro, but I just wanted to thank you so much for coming on the show. And I think that there's going to be people that are going to go through this that might be banging their head against the wall, that are real estate investors trying to figure out what their direction is, and are going to get a ton of inspiration out of your story from how you went from buy and hold rentals that through creative finance to short-term rentals to some industrial deals to then to the hospitality industry. And there's a lot of bobbing and weaving that happens in this industry. So I am super excited to have that story shared with our audience members. So Brett, thank you very much for being on the show, man.
Yeah, no worries, Matt. Appreciate you having me.
All right. First question is always a doozy, man. You were born, now you're here. What happened in between?
Yeah, for sure. So I grew up kind of small town, rural upbringing, and always was kind of entrepreneurial as a kid. Was always kind of bartering and buying and selling, and being in a rural area, was very involved in like motorsports. So buying snowmobiles and dirt bikes and fixing them up and selling them. And that kind of led into a career of its own. When I was in high school, I started working in sales, and that was really one of the pivotal times for me, was working at a commission dealership sales floor at 16 years old. For me, never really being good at sports or school, that was like the first time that I ever like just had something that fit, So I, naturally it worked, and I ran with that path. Went to school, got a marketing degree, and basically was just looking at different directions that I could take a career in the power sports industry, and was fortunate enough to get a internship with Polaris, which is a Fortune 500 company and, one of the big power sports manufacturers based out of Minnesota. And, for me, that was, we were on the dream track, picked up, moved to Minnesota, had kind of came into an underdog in a program like that. They recruited a lot out of like the big business school programs, but I was just the kid who went to a small state school in New York, but had worked in a dealership, and it went well. Went through there, you got accepted into their kind of leadership fast track program, and by all means, like, should have been the dream job. It was going to Vegas for sales meetings a couple of times a year, Formula One races, motorcycle rallies. But, kind of like a lot of us that are on this real estate path, there was just something about it that I had this like pit in my stomach. So it was the cubicle thing, the meetings, the typical corporate hierarchy stuff that you deal with behind the scenes. But the only thing that I disliked more at that point in life is the first time I was really paying rent. So I had a coworker who had house hacked for the first time and kind of introduced this idea. And ultimately my wife now, but girlfriend at the time, we made the decision to use our FHA loan to buy a duplex out in Minnesota. And that, it was right kind of in 2020 when COVID was locking down. So we got to basically spend COVID fixing this place up. And for me, it was kind of this like spark life, aha moment, because it was just like flipping snowmobiles and motorcycles and dirt bikes when I was a kid, and a lot of the similarities there. And, that was really kind of the spark for me that kind of steered me out of this corporate path and running down real estate full time.
So let's talk about the transition into short-term rentals. I mean, like, that's not an easy business. I mean, for a lot of people that are out there, that it's like, it looks really nice and sexy from the outside looking in, but actually when you get into the thick of it is not that fun a lot of times. So like, what was the reason for that, like that pivot at that point in time?
Yeah, so after like a year and a half period, we bought that first duplex, and then we just started rolling. Like anything that we could do, listen to Bigger Pockets to get more units. So we were doing hard money BRRRR deals. We did more owner finance stuff. Basically, we'd save up money, and then after a year, move to the next property. We started doing some creative finance and got to about 9 units, seller financing of long-term rentals. We kind of took what I'll call like our first step back, and this will be a first of a couple that we might talk about, and realized like I just hated being a landlord. Like flat out, I loved real estate. I just did not enjoy just the responsibility of like being like somebody's home and all, everything that goes around that. So my wife had zero interest in, the typical multifamily, but she's always kind of had this creative eye. Her mom is an interior, like a home stager. She always kind of was around that and that idea. So we had also started, podcasts, and people that we had seen were talking about short-term rentals and Airbnbs. And one day it was her who said, hey, I might be interested in something like that. And for me, it was like, all right, we could give this a shot, because I could keep focusing on the real estate side, but she could kind of be this more creative, she's a teacher by trade. So she just has that, like, that people knack for, putting others before herself. And so it's like, all right, let's give this a shot. And as we started looking for the properties that would be the first short-term rentals, we were just running down any avenues. So, to jump ahead a little bit, we ended up actually lining up a Burr property, a master lease on a cabin in the Finger Lakes, and another arbitrage deal that all like came to fruition at the same time. So we went from basically 0 to 3 short-term rentals in a 2.5 month period, and basically just threw ourselves at it and absolutely kind of fell in love with that hospitality world for the first time. And for us, it was really just this kind of blend where I could focus on the things that I was good at. She could focus on the things that she was good at with the hospitality. And then I was doing a lot of like the acquisition, the operations, like the back end systems. And that was kind of the first time that we were like, hey, we got something again that we enjoy. It's like within the real estate vein, you know what I mean? And ran with that for a year, and then for whatever reason decided to pivot it. But that's the next piece.
Now, so everything was going absolutely peachy and fine in the STR space. I've been following you in your journey for quite some time, and all of a sudden, Brett's the industrial guy. Tell me about that story.
Yeah. So as we were going through the short-term rentals, I had my gripes with it. The biggest thing that I could see from a mile away is like we had built a business without a doubt in terms of the income that it was generating, the infrastructure that we had in terms of the team, but it was never going to be valued as a business. And what I mean by that is it's still a business taking place within a piece or a residential real estate asset that's always going to be valued on a comparable sale approach. In terms of appraised value. So that's when I kind of fell in love or started learning about commercial real estate, because I really liked the idea that we could build something. And again, being in numbers and an operations or operationally driven guy, it clicked. The idea of like income-based valuation, and you put X in, you can get X out a little bit more mathematically than just off of appraisals. So we just started researching different types of commercial real estate. And for me, and I think a lot of it is my sales background, like we just started reaching out to basically anybody that had a for rent sign out there, whether it was self-storage, multifamily, office, industrial, just trying to not even buy at that point, just meet with owners of different asset classes. And the ones that seemed to mesh of those owner conversations just happened to be these industrial owners. And I just always really liked that they were kind of, blue collar guys, a little rough around the edges. I fell in love with the idea of these triple net leases and that it's basically mailbox money. So we decided, it was myself and actually another partner at that time that I had bought a couple of long-term rentals with, that we were going to go after that, and we were going to go after industrial. So we started cold calling pretty much every industrial owner in the greater Rochester area, lined up a few deals with seller financing, which was really cool, but then kind of got what I would call like my first punch in the teeth. Like everybody's got a plan until you get punched in the mouth. And like we had always just gotten really, I don't want to say lucky, but you just don't realize it in the moment, like of the natural strengths that we had that helped us through some of the early residential deals, the Airbnb. But then we got into this industrial world where you're learning about leasing, which is a totally different bear. And then the other piece that we learned about a lot too was the environmental aspect side of things, which is huge in these industrial properties. So to flash forward a little bit, basically we had structured a couple of purchases in a way that kind of put training wheels on the deal for us. So they were going to be seller finance deals where we were going to have the opportunity to lease them out for like 6 months to a year before we actually closed. That was on 2 properties specifically. And it was in that process that we basically realized, like, man, it's tough to lease these things. It's different, and really making sure you have a property that's a use case that meets the tenant demand in the area. And as I mentioned before, that environmental factor where, it's an extra level of due diligence. You never have to consider like if there's oil in the ground and how that can turn a deal. And we had a couple of properties that had, issues with it and were narrow misses. So Yeah, so that was kind of the journey in industrial. So again, that kind of resulted in it. We ended up not moving forward with any of those deals, but the takeaway from it was we learned a lot about commercial underwriting. We had spoken with a lot of banks and attorneys and investors to put those deals together. And although we didn't end up, pulling the trigger on any of those, it was kind of this step back moment where basically it caused us to take a look at like, hey, what do we want to do? Why did this Airbnb thing work and this didn't? And then, really take a look at like what strengths do we have going for us, which at that point in time, it was, we have experience in hospitality, this thing that's working. We now have this understanding of commercial underwriting and banking and all that. And, you can kind of start to dotted line, put together how this hotel motel idea came to fruition.
Getting kicked in the teeth is something that everybody goes through, especially I have this concept, it's called the Midas syndrome. And everybody's sort of like, what is it, King Midas, and everything he touched turned to gold and all that sort of thing. And I think that sometimes people, when they start in business, it's like that beginner's luck in the Alchemist, where the God or universe will like give you beginner's luck, and then sometimes we dilute ourselves into thinking that, well, I'm good at this, so I must be good at everything else out there. And it's when you venture outside of that the universe quickly humbles you. And, it's definitely happened before, and also in the environmental aspect of things. So I guess, what were you feeling at the time when you were like facing so much struggle with this? Like, what actually caused that? Like, how did you feel when you were like, oh, I had this plan and now it's like, I don't know if it's going to happen?
Yeah. It's a tough feeling of just like, uncertainty is the only way that I can deem it, of like, cause again, for us, and it was about a year period that we were going after those industrial deals heavy, where it's like every ounce of every day. At that point I was full-time in real estate from what the short-term rentals that it delivers. So literally you have this thing that's like your attention all day, every day. And after 10 to 12 months of putting towards it, basically, for us, it was on both of those properties had separate flags. One was like tenants leave, a bunch of tenants pulled out at once, and the other one, and some environmental stuff. And then the other one was like really heavy environmental, to the point where we just couldn't in good faith. So it really is like, I don't know if it's like hopelessness and then, backed by uncertainty, but it leaves you in a tough spot. And I would say, like, fortunately at that point is when I had gotten a lot heavier into some of like I don't know if you call it like business professional development, like books and podcasts and things like that. And I think that's, I never had this like, can't get out of bed, what am I going to do with my life? And I do think a lot of it is because of some of that content that I was listening, the Ed Milet's, the Tim Grovers, Alex Hormozy really started blowing up at that point in time. And I think that's what really helped us, like, hey, this really sucks. We lost money on due diligence that we're not, fortunately we got deposits back, but you're not going to get the due diligence money back. But then it was just a lot of that content that I was listening to that kind of pushed us to, okay, you can either sulk and you can go back to work, or you can rebuild from the ashes, figure out something new, and then go back with a plan of attack with all the learnings that you've had in knowledge from those experiences.
True. For every 10 books that I read, I probably read one real estate book. Everything else is personal development related, because in this business and any other business, you have to come to grips with the fact that you're going to be getting like punched in the face and stomped on the throat. And you need to reframe your mind, because it's really like, we have to go back to like evolutionary psychology, where, it wasn't too long ago, we were like people living in caves and living in tribes and stuff like that, and in a hunter-gatherer society. So we have a lot of this stuff hardwired within us. And so you go out there into the world of business and you start, facing the saber-toothed tigers and that sort of thing. And you just have to like invest in that sort of thing, because a lot of people kind of get it backwards, right? Like, I'm going to read one personal development book or invest in personal development. And then the rest of it, the balance of it, I'm going to, read on like technical education, that sort of thing. And the thing is that no matter how technically proficient you get in something, you're going to face resistance and challenges along the way. So let's take it a step forward here a little bit, Brett. I saw your Instagram post that you were closing on a boutique motel, and I was like flabbergasted. Like, what was the transition from what were you doing before to this? Because I was like, what is going on? I was completely shocked.
Yeah, so when the industrial stuff started crumbling apart, my wife, at this point, it was my wife, Casey, and we started going back because this idea of like, hey, how do we get back to this vein that worked? And originally, the plan was just to go buy more Airbnbs of like, hey, this thing worked, let's keep it going. But again, I had my gripes with it in terms of just like from an operational standpoint, like, do we really want to own these houses all over the place? And then also from like a funding standpoint, like, does it make sense to buy these? A lot of regulation was passing. So again, fortunately through the knowledge that we acquired at commercial real estate, it really prompted that idea of like, hey, do we go after a hotel and motel? And, for us, we were big skiers, we were big mountain bikers, and we had a van, a converted Sprinter van that personally, so we were traveling all the time passing these assets that were kind of in disrepair. Like, man, wouldn't it be cool if we bought one of those and basically just had it all underneath one roof, and we can keep doing what we're doing, but benefit, from these aspects of commercial real estate that we had learned about in the industrial process. So again, another learning from those hunts that we did is we just picked up the phone and started cold calling owners. I talked a little bit about how, like, when we were first getting into commercial, like, basically we were just reaching out to individuals, not even to buy, but just to get to know them. And it kind of like took down that fear barrier of cold calling a little bit, because you realize like a lot of people are friendly. And if you're young and, I don't know, you come with a plan and what you're asking for, like, people will talk to you. And so we just started calling basically every hotel owner in a ski town in the Northeast and just asking if they'd be interested in selling. And to our surprise, had quite a few that came back and were interested. So that was kind of the progression going in. Similar to industrial, we had our first deal that we found and, basically put everything together around that deal. Through the industrial journey that we went on, we talked a lot to people about what we were doing at local real estate meetups. And so when we went to the hotel thing, a lot of them had seen how we handled the real estate deals in the industrial space and why we walked away with them. And I actually think from an investor standpoint, we earned a lot of respect because, again, they were seller finance deals that were basically teed up to us on a silver platter. So I think it earned us some respect that they saw the reasons that we walked away and the safety that it provided, because we could have lost out big on those assets. So when we brought up the hospitality, the hotel motel assets we were going after and why, and how we were piggybacking on our learnings, we started having people come back to us and said like, hey, yeah, if, let us know if you get anything, that would make sense to bring investors in and we'd be interested. So we had our first deal. We pulled bank together, we pulled investors together, and kind of in the Brett luck at that point in time, the sellers ended up not being able to go through with that deal. They had a personal kind of interrelation that prevented them from closing. But we got back to the phones. We had some people on our list from that first round of cold calling and ended up landing on this 17-unit motel in Killington, Vermont. So that ended up being the first deal that we went after. Fortunately, we were able to pull a lot of these investors in that were interested with us and combine it with an SBA loan to ultimately put together the purchase and the renovation with equity from those investors. And happy to, delve into that as deep as you want to go. But that was kind of the run up into the hotel space.
So let's stop for a moment and talk about, you mentioned some stuff here that's like, I just don't want to gloss over it. And you mentioned that you were having conversations, you're going to meetups, you're active on social media, which for those people listening right now that want to position themselves to raise capital, I mean, social media is an amazingly effective tool in doing that. It's never going to replace the belly-to-belly interactions you have with a potential investment partner, but I think it augments them and actually quickens the relationship building capacity of that. Like, I just don't think, you don't need to go out there, and I think probably by accident you got like 100,000 followers on Instagram. I don't think it was.
Yeah, I can't. Yeah.
I don't think it was intentional or anything like that, but
no.
But yeah, so I guess like, were you just using the cold calling skills you developed in terms of building those relationships? Like, tell us about, I guess, how you were talking to potential investment partners, like, throughout your journey.
Yeah, so a lot of it spawned from relationships that we had made. There's a couple of different real estate meetups that we were going to. And you're right, the social media was a big tool, because at that point in time, I mean, I had 400 or 500 followers on my real estate Instagram page that was mostly friends and family. But what it allowed is we would meet people at the meetups and they would ask, oh, like, do you have a business card or anything like that? And at the time I did it, but it's like, oh, I have this Instagram page if you want to kind of follow along or message me through there. So people did. And when that kind of created this dynamic is I would meet people through the real estate meetup. then they'd follow our page where we were talking about the process and the due diligence and where we were at on some of these deals. And then we'd go back to the meetups. And again, over the course of a 4 to 5 month period leading up to all this. And that's when like the industrial stuff was going on. And then they would ask questions. Oh, I saw you post about this and that. And that's kind of how that relationship built leading up to a lot of these deals. So again, the really useful part, and again, like the point that I'd like to drive home is you don't have to have this massive following to have that kind of impact. But then it gets to the point when it does have time to have some conversations. It's nice if people have kind of been following your posts for, even if it's just a couple of month period, to see everything in between the real estate meetup. But then when you do get together, you can have a really impactful conversation. And of course, when a deal in an investment opportunity came up for us, everyone's up to speed, and or at least they feel like they've been along with you for this journey all the way up to it,
So this is a super slick trick, to quote Marty Garzanti. Super pro tip is don't get business cards. I have business cards, but I don't even bring them to events because giving somebody a business card is an excuse to like end the conversation there. And then they turn up into, my favorite place is like the top right drawer of my bathroom vanity. And then when my wife's like, you're not going to call these people, like just get rid of them. Right. And so I just throw them in the trash. So what I do now actually is if I make a new friend at like, let's say a meetup or a networking event, I actually have, I'm like, they ask me for a business card. I'm like, I just tell them, hey, I'm a bad business person. I forgot to bring my business cards, but why don't we connect? And, where are you at? Like, where are you active? Are you on LinkedIn? Or are you on like Facebook or Instagram or anything like that? And then also it gives me the excuse to be like, hey, when can we, I'd really like to be able to catch up with you one-on-one. I know you got to make your, circulate around here and stuff like that. Like, can we get let's together for coffee or lunch, or whatever. Are you open to that? And like, yeah. And like, I whip out my phone, I pull up my calendar. I was like, okay, when are you busy? Like, what's a good, what's generally a good date and time for that? So then that, like, not having a business card, if you had a business card there, it would just end and you'd walk away from each other and then you'd never connect with each other again. And you'd be like, sometimes I've found business cards where I didn't even know, like, I was like, who is this person? So,
yeah, no, absolutely.
So super slick trick there. So you were driving around in the Sprinter van, cold calling motel owners and that sort of thing. Kind of walk me through how the conversation went with this particular 17-room motel owner, kind of like start to finish in terms of like what the talk track was on that.
Yeah, so basically the story on this one is we knew looking at it pretty quickly that it was a good deal, from some of the other ones that we had underwritten, just from a price per unit standpoint. For us, again, the part that I'll hit on too is like we're very intentional about the markets that we were going into because again, personally, big skiers, big snowboarders, so it just made sense to go into a market where we could have that like customer need understanding a little bit better. So when we reached out to him, the property was actually under contract. And this is one thing that I'll note is it is excruciatingly painful to get a loan for a hospitality asset. It's just a very difficult asset class to get lending against. So we kind of knew that from some of the deals that we were doing. We knew that he owned it outright, but it was under contract. So we kind of had like these little bits of information that he gave, but we kept following up with him. Like every week, we'd circle back. And after about 3 to 4 weeks, he came back and he said, hey, listen, I don't know if this buyer is going to be able to perform or not. So he gave us all of the due diligence materials, all the P&Ls, everything like that. He's like, if you want to start underwriting, we'll let you have your crack at it. So we did. And it looked really good. I mean, consistently, obviously, with hospitality, COVID was a little bit of a black hole, but when we were looking at the front end of COVID and the back end of COVID, they were consistently doing about $230,000 a year in net income, but they were only asking $1.4 million, which you can say, let's say valued at a 10 cap, for instance, which flash forward is what we ended up seeing. Like there was a split there. So eventually we got to the point where he called us up one day and he said, hey, listen, yeah, we pulled it from the other buyer. They weren't able to perform on time. And that's when we got more of the story that he had owned this property for a while, but really he owned 7 or 8 other hotels that were all in like the Philly, New Jersey area that were all like branded Best Western, franchised hotels. And this was his one kind of boutique hotel. He was selling this to 1031 exchange into a bigger property that was in Philly. And basically came to us. He said, that's the reason why there's this price. Like, I know I'm serving this one up on a silver platter, but I can't sell or finance. I need you to get a loan. So if you guys think you can do it, basically I'll give you your shot. but he knew that we were young and that we were, not loaded people. So fortunately, again, kind of having this sense of everything happens for a reason, we had gone through that first property that I mentioned where the sellers had to back out. So we were able to convey to them, hey, listen, we got to start from scratch because that bank was in New York and this one's in Vermont. But we were able to get approved for the first time. We had investors lined up for that last deal. Will you give us a crack at it? And he gave us the purchase contract amidst a few other buyers. And that kind of set off that procession of, due diligence and underwriting for us, which was kind of back into inspections, tearing apart all the books. Because again, it's in this hotel business, you're not just underwriting the property itself, but it's really a full business that you're looking into as well and making sure, hey, can we replicate or improve on what they were doing in the past? And we saw a lot of opportunities in terms of this was definitely a lower end asset in the town of Killington specifically. We knew that there were a lot of tailwinds in terms of developments that the resort was putting into town for a new village that they're going to be building over the next couple of years. And that we knew that resort had also been buying up motels for staff housing. So there was a big constriction on just availability, which is why they were able to perform so well. I mean, candidly, being the crummiest motel in town. So, ultimately, kind of next step is we were able to leverage a SBA loan combined with investors who put in equity into our deal to basically our down payment and our closing costs. And the SBA was able to fund the purchase and the renovations for us on this property. And, again, kind of a condensed version of how it went, but that was kind of the segue into ultimately being able to execute the deal.
Let's talk about the financing, because on your Instagram, and I don't know if you're referencing this, but you were talking about these banks you're bringing motel deals to were like, well, you have a lack of experience. And then you start scrolling through all of your reviews that you've like positive, stellar reviews you had on your short-term rentals. You're like, how is this even happening right now? So I guess walk us through kind of the progression of how you actually figured out this financing things, and then maybe some like, I guess, dead ends you ran into along the process.
Yeah. So basically as we started digging into seller, like other people who had executed these deals, a lot of them had used seller financing in the past, because the hard part when we started just reaching out to like a few of our intro banks, like the local credit unions around the property, what we learned is a lot of banks don't like hospitality because compared to like a car wash or a self-storage facility, like the way that I would explain, or that it was explained to me by one banker actually, is you can be a jerk. And as long as you have really good business acumen, you can run a self-storage facility. It's very difficult for a bank to underwrite if you are a hospitable person or not, or if you have good design acumen. And that's why it can be very difficult for an underwriter to look at a profile. So typically they want to see you have past experience. So you see a lot of operators get in with a seller financing deal on their first one, but it just wasn't an opportunity here. So as we started learning around, so that was the first kind of wall that we hit, was like, even though we've had Airbnbs, we don't have concrete experience running a 10-unit or larger hotel building. So as we started calling around, we began learning about SBA loans. So an SBA loan is a small business administration loan that won't work for like a multifamily building, but works for assets like self-storage and hotels and car washes, where it's a business taking place within a piece of commercial real estate. And it's kind of, I'm going to use it because it helped me. I don't know if it helped me understand it. Almost similar to an FHA loan, where it's like a government-backed mortgage where they'll take a little bit of a gamble. So what we found is that these SBA lenders would take a little bit more of a gamble on us, because while we still had to convey that we had experience with hospitality, which is the reviews that you mentioned, like we could show them, hey, we've never ran something this big before, but from, being able to deliver a positive guest experience, we have it. They would take that gamble. And then it also helped us get past our next roadblock, where a lot of conventional, I guess you'd call it commercial lending, they want to see you or somebody in the deal have a net worth equal or greater than the loan amount, which we also didn't have. That was another piece where these SBA loans kind of unlocked for us, is as long as the deal itself had the equity, they didn't look at us as operators as much. So that ended up being the path that we went down. Still wasn't easy. We called between the two properties. I think we spoke with about 30 lenders on that first deal that fell through. And then we learned a little bit, and basically we were able to condense it down to a whopping 20 lenders that we talked to, because we had to start over in Vermont. But ultimately we're just able to find that one bank that, they were kind of local ski town bank that understand the vision of what we were doing. And, like any deal, you have your hiccups that you hit in due diligence, but they ultimately were the ones that got it done with us. So the way that it was structured was it was a $1.4 million purchase price, and then $300,000 of construction costs to upfit the property that they wrap into one loan. And then your down payment, which for us was 20%, was this kind of total project cost. And the beauty of that is it allowed Casey and I to take in investors, but because our down payment was less, being like not having to raise funds for our renovation, we could still maintain, majority ownership of the property. We could give away equity to investors, but keep them below the personal guarantee amounts, but still give them an incredible return on the deal. So that kind of is how the financing piece came together.
Yeah, I was just about to ask you about the total capital stack on that. So the follow-up question I had to that was, what was the membership interest breakup between you and your investors in this deal to comply with the SBA? And I don't know, did you have to have them sign a personal guarantee, or were you able to keep them out of that?
Yeah, so the way that we did it is it kind of worked out. So the SBA threshold for a personal guarantee is 19%. So we brought in 2 investors for $400,000 total investment. And basically we were able to give away 19% to each group, which was enough to give them what we felt was and what we kind of agreed was a sizable enough return to offset the reality of this is our first commercial deal, and to make sure that carrot's big enough, but allowed them to stay out of having to do the personal guarantee. So just my wife and I were able to guarantee the project, while also, being able to have that kind of majority interest that was important to us, because that is the reality on an asset class like this. It is not a passive investment by any means. And anybody that tells you that Airbnb or hotels can be a turnkey passive thing, somebody needs to be running it. And so whether it's you or a partner that you're bringing in, but for us, it was my wife. And currently, I'm in Vermont right now, living 5 hours away from home, making it happen. So making sure that, that you have the ownership and control to justify that as well.
So you gave up 40% to the investors.
Yep. 38.
Oh, 38%. So yeah, I don't want to shortchange you on that one. So, so let's talk about, what was your offering? Like, how did you actually, did you already have a pre-packaged, like, hey, we're going to find hotel deals, this is what we're offering? Or did you kind of like look at this deal and you're like, what could we offer specific based upon this deal and the constraints to our investment partners on that? Tell me about that.
Yeah, so fortunately, it'll reflect back to that first deal that we did. It was the property before this one. That was a longer, that was a off-market, owners weren't in a rush to sell, which, ended up not being a good thing because they had issues going on. But what it gave us is a more like 4 to 5 month period of putting that deal together, when we actually had a deal that we could put into a business plan and projections and a couple of different offering options to take to investors, and then massage out with a physical example. So that was the deal that we brought this investor group into, did the underwriting, brought them up even to see the property. We had really pulled everything together for that deal. And in terms of the offering, we had presented in a couple of different options, because again, we had never raised money before. We had done, hard money and private money lending loans, but never in like an equity position. And so basically the way that we personally tackled that is served it up in a couple of different options. One, in like a full, equity coming up in, basically being a GP in the deal alongside of us. And then other options like a hybrid approach, or, I'm still not an expert in, setups, but basically other ideas of how we could have like some equity with a preferred return tied to it. And what we ended up doing there is basically as a group sitting down and saying like, hey, what makes sense for everybody? And then taking it to an attorney and saying like, hey, like now from like a legal standpoint, how do we actually like pull this together? So we had done that on the first deal. So by the time we got to the second deal, which while still off market, did have a time constraint because he was 1031 exchanging into a new property. We had that plan put together, and it was more of a box check of like, hey, here's the updated figures. Does this still work for everybody? Again, there's things like operating agreements and, attorney things that we still had to work out as a group, but that kind of higher level plan, was put together, which in this deal was just they were content coming in as just equity partners alongside us and contributing to us in the front end, and we felt that it was the best for the project to kind of guarantee success in the short term, but then have a bigger payout for them in the back run.
Okay, so if I'm reading this correctly, so no preferred rate of return on this deal? Okay, perfect. Yeah, that's the one thing that a lot of people, see, they hear about real estate syndications. I've never syndicated a deal before. I mean, every single deal that I've done has been customized to that deal, to the particular investment partners we have on that, and also us too, because you want to make sure that you're partnering with operators that are interested as well. So I think that was really smart, because now you don't have this like gun against your head, and because that's the one thing is like when you start, we're going to pay out a preferred rate of return quarterly or monthly or whatever it is, and things that are in a rural town, ski town, we're not really sure in terms of like we're pretty sure, but we're not totally absolutely like guaranteed sure as terms of like what type of cash flow or preferred return this is going to pay out. So yeah, that's awesome, man.
And for sure, I mean, there's still a lot, and for anybody listening that's going through this for the first time, and again, that was kind of our takeaway is, you still want to do your due diligence into, hey, comping other properties, doing the market research, doing your projections on what you think it's going to do. But then, yeah, I mean, that was really a game changer for us. Again, for us as operators being new to this, is more so coming to the group with a couple of different options, but to your point exactly, basically, how can we build this around everybody's interest on the first one versus I think if we came with this like stranglehold of like, hey, this is what the deal is going to be. Do you want it or not? At least for us in our first deal, I think it would have made it a lot more challenging. So just kind of my hindsight looking back at the process.
Yeah, collaborative. So my last question on this probably should have been one of the earlier ones. What's the business, because you're midstream on this deal right now in terms of the value add. So tell us about the business plan.
Yeah, so we came in and we closed, which was absolutely nuts. So we ended up closing in early February. So February 22nd, 2024 was our closing date, which here is like the most insane time to close. So it was a bittersweet thing because we kind of had to run and take over. The current management was retiring. So my wife and I, day one, took over all operations of the business. The beauty of that, though, is we were able to cash flow right out of the gate. So we had about 2 months of solid cash flow where we were able to build up some of that additional operating income. And then come that Marchish time frame, that's when things start slowing down around here. So we knew from that couple month period and candidly coming into it that there was going to be a lot of opportunity here to improve these rooms, to fix them up. And what we had done in our due diligence is like, hey, basically if we can take, we really don't need to overperform with this property. If we can just take it and bring it up to what everybody else in the local area is doing, that's all we need to have this be a solid deal without any of the added benefits of the Instagram stuff that's now weighing in on that too. So that's where we knew that we wanted to do a renovation. So the way it's played out is really naturally for us in a great way is we were able to get in for ski season, log some dollars because it was already a profitable cash flowing business as it sat. And then now as we're naturally having some of that seasonal turnover, now is when we're neck deep in renovation. So, I mean, yeah, today we got a crew of 6 guys, 2 drywallers and 2 plumbers that are here pretty much all day knocking it out. So over the course of a 3-month period that we're in the middle of, so March to, we got about 4 weeks left. And about the first week of June, we should be done. We're renovating all 17 guest rooms. So kind of complete strip down of the rooms, lifting up the exterior a little bit, again, using the draws from that construction loan. And then we did raise a little bit of extra funding for just kind of like operating capital as well. And then come June 1st, we'll basically relaunch with a whole new name and brand that we're building behind the scenes too, because we want to be able to shed a lot of those old guest reviews and start from scratch with our thing. And then, really the beautiful part about Killington, and for anybody that might be interested in going down this path at all, is picking a multi-season market. So here there's a lot of, the Appalachian Trail comes right through here with through hikers. You have a lot of mountain biking and downhill mountain biking at the resort. So it's really worked out well that we came in operating the asset as it is. We're in the middle of our upfit and our renovation right now, and then we'll relaunch here in about 4 to 5 weeks time and hopefully cruise off into the sunset.
So let's talk about the exit strategy here. Is it the whole strategy to establish some seasoning with a financial performance that you can bring to the bank on a newly repositioned property and then refinance and get your investors their capital back? Talk me through that.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's exactly it. So we'll operate right now. We're looking at a 4-year operation plan of getting it in, getting it stabilized. A lot of banks, especially in the hospitality space, they want to see 2 full years because we don't have a lease or anything like that to go off of. I mean, it's really an underwrite of our P&L that happens that they want to see 2 years of consistently. So that'll really be the game plan, is run it, optimize it the best we can, pull on different levers, whether it's in-house cleaning staff, hiring cleaning staff out, different revenue models that basically give us some time to really optimize this beast. And then in about four years time, we'll look to refinance out. And again, the plan right now is basically get them their capital back. But at least at this point, I'm young and I'm hungry and I'm excited. And our plan is to hold this asset for a while and keep running it and hopefully acquire a couple more along the way as well. I
was just going to ask you, what's next? More?
Oh yeah, no, I think so. It's hard to do this and run and gun every day. My goal, this is to stabilize this property and make it the best it could be. I'm at a phase where I'm 26 years old. And so I feel that, while I have a lot of urgency and a lot of personal drive within to keep it going, I know that I got a long career ahead of me as well. So the first and foremost goal is just to make sure that this property is a solid foundation of performance. Because what we know is it should make life easier, when we go to do the next one, and having actually that first deal under our belt. But I know we can't sit on it for too long. So we have a few other off-market deals that we're underwriting right now. And we'll see what comes with those over the next few months here. But for now, it's just, make the most of what we have in front of us.
Excellent. Last question, man, before I cut you loose. A lot of listeners that listen to this show are doing small, multifamily, single family rentals. They're looking to swim upstream into larger commercial deals that create more financial impact to be accretive to whatever goal they want to accomplish, whether it's financial independence or whatever, or just living a baller ass lifestyle in general. What are your words of advice for them to kind of bust through that ceiling and take that journey into going bigger? Yeah,
I did think the right way to word it in a non-cliche way. The biggest thing is
take action.
Well, no, yeah, I know. That's what I do. Don't be afraid to start from scratch. And I think if there's one trend that hopefully has bled through of my journey, is I've started over multiple times, and at each one, just being able to humble yourself. If you've been successful at the thing that you're doing, and maybe, like I was at one point, your ego is feeling a little bit puffed up. I think the biggest thing is don't be afraid to go back to what it was buying your first deal again in that new room, and going and meeting with the operators, really just out of a curiosity to see what it's like, calling the banks to understand, really that's, to put it in your words, taking action is what it takes, but really just going back to being able to sponge and soak up all the information again and start over. I think that's the part that can be intimidating to at least myself, but a lot of my peers that I've talked to about it, is almost just not knowing where to start. And at least for me, it's starting from scratch, the same way you got into that first deal again, and just going out, talking to people, networking, seeing how other individuals have done it. And then at the end of the day, not being afraid to pick up a phone and call the broker, call the owner, call the bank, because ultimately those are the individuals who are going to arm you with the tools to make it happen.
That's money advice. I was going to say, I forgot to say massive action. Take massive action. That's the most clear. That's the most cliche thing.
Yeah. And the tough part is that it's a big piece of it, but it's knowing what direction to take action in, I think, is the biggest piece that we went through. And ultimately, you got to get around and hear out other people who are those steps ahead of you, or those informational resources that can drive you in the right direction to take massive action.
Excellent, man. So thanks for being on the show. I'm looking forward to talking to you in the green room. And to close out, if you're listening to this right now and you want to get on more in-depth educational content, definitely check out my YouTube channel. It's Matt M. Drouin. That's MattMDrouin. I put out long-form content associated with how to put together financing, how to raise capital specifically. So definitely check that out and subscribe to it. There's going to be something in it for you if you're looking to swim upstream and do larger deals and that sort of thing, because that journey begins now in terms of educating yourself. And then secondly, definitely I want you guys to check out Brett. Brett, where can they find you?
Yeah, the best place to find myself and my wife, Casey, really is on Instagram. It's our page is called Investors, so in with 2 N's, and then Investors on Instagram. It's where we post everything about what we're doing, and we do our best to respond to comments and messages, and would be happy to connect with anybody there.
Excellent, man. Thank you so much for coming on the show again.
Awesome. Thanks, Matt. Appreciate you having me.